After attending a church in my early teens, I got to know a youth leader there called Wayne. By his own admission, Wayne was a reformed ex-street fighter and thug, and there were several things I admired about him. He was fun to be with, he clearly cared about the young people he was working with, and he had what I considered to be a fairly healthy disregard for what other people thought of him. But the most impacting aspect of Wayne's work with young people was the time that he gave to us. Wayne would occasionally give talks to young people. I do not remember much about them. But what I do remember is the countless hours that I spent with Wayne, playing pool, drinking coffee, or chatting in local fast food establishments, talking with him about God, life and the universe. I find it interesting that most of the teaching of Jesus that we read about in the Gospels did not take place in the context of sermons or religious services, but in the conversations that he had with his disciples, his critics, those that were curious about him, and those desperate for help and healing. Much of this took place around a table of some kind, and so it is with this passage from Luke's Gospel. When one of the Pharisees invited Jesus to have dinner with him, he went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. A woman in that town, who'd lived a sinful life, learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house, so she came there with an alabaster jar of perfume. As she stood behind him at his feet weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears. Then she wiped them with her hair, kissed them, and poured perfume on them. When the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, "If this man were a prophet, he would know who is touching him and what kind of woman she is, that she is a sinner." Jesus answered him, "Simon, I have something to tell you." "Tell me, teacher," he said. Two people owed money to a certain moneylender. One owed him 500 denarii and the other 50. Neither of them had the money to pay him back, so he forgave the debts of both. Now which of them will love him more? Simon replied, "I suppose the one who had the bigger debt forgiven." "You have judged correctly," Jesus said. Then he turned toward the woman and said to Simon, "Do you see this woman? I came into your house. You did not give me any water for my feet, but she has wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You did not give me a kiss, but this woman, from the time I entered, has not stopped kissing my feet. You did not pour oil on my head, but she has poured perfume on my feet. Therefore I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven as her great love has shown. But whoever has been forgiven little, loves little." Then Jesus said to her, "Your sins are forgiven." The other guests began to say among themselves, "Who is this who even forgives sins?" Jesus said to the woman, "Your faith has saved you. Go in peace." Luke chapter 7, verses 36 to 50. There is much I find interesting here, and much that I think both individuals and churches can learn from. Number one, Jesus was open to people with questions. We do not know much about Simon the Pharisee or his motives for inviting Jesus around for dinner. It could be that he had heard something of Jesus' reputation and was curious about him. It could be that, like some of the religious leaders we read about in the Gospels, he was hoping to catch Jesus saying or doing something that could be used against him. We do know that he had forgotten his manners, failing to provide what was then the customary and basic courtesies of greeting guests with a kiss, offering a bit of fragrance as a way for a guest to freshen up after a journey, or providing any water for washing the feet of sandalled travellers. Nevertheless, it seems Jesus rarely turned down an invitation to dinner, and was often open and welcoming of the opportunity to speak with the curious or critical. And so should the church be today. Number 2, Jesus was open to sinners. Although some commentators have speculated that she may have been a local prostitute, we do not know very much about the lady in this story. We do not know her name, we do not know her past and lifestyle that led to Simon referring to her as a sinful woman. What we can see in this account is that whatever her past and present realities may have been, this woman believed that she could come to Jesus as she was, and this faith in Jesus would be honoured. We can also see in this lady a healthy disregard for the opinions of others. Without going into details here, for any woman in this culture to show this kind of extravagant and emotional display of public affection would be seen as embarrassing and shameful. She does not care, and nor does Jesus. We do not know what may have driven this woman to Jesus at this point in her life. But from her actions, it seems likely that she had seen and heard something of Jesus before, which made her believe that if she did come to him at this time, she would find acceptance, forgiveness, freedom, and hope. Do people feel that this is what they are going to get when they come to church? Number 3, there was more than one sinner in the room. As can easily happen with both religious and non-religious folk, Simon had become self-righteous. He had split the world into 2 camps, with himself firmly on the side of the good guys. One of the hardest ideas for some to accept about the Christian gospel is the idea that we are all flawed, fall short, and need forgiveness. We all do things we should not. We do not do things that we should. I agree with the sentiments of Martin Luther King Jr. when he said, "There are times that all of us know somehow that there is a Mr. Hyde and a Dr. Jekyll in us." Of course, some people work hard to display compassion, show integrity, and do the right thing. Some would admit that at times they have been selfish and stupid. Some have broken every rule in the book. But one of the points that I think Jesus is trying to make in his story here of the 2 debtors is that some may sin a little and some may sin a lot. Some may owe a little and some may owe a lot, but neither could clear their own debt. That relied upon the generosity and grace of someone else. Which leads me to point number 4. All can be forgiven and free. One of the beautiful things about the Christian gospel is that we can come as we are, but we do not have to leave the same way. When she comes to Jesus, she is broken-hearted. But as the ancient psalmist wrote, the Lord is near to the broken-hearted. And as both James and Peter quote in their New Testament letters, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Perhaps the only people you cannot help in life are those who will not accept that they need it. But in this account, this woman comes to Jesus with gratitude and faith, not in her own goodness, but in his. She leaves with peace. I believe that if we come in the same way, we can get the same outcome.